The sun rose over New Haven, a small colony nestled on the edge of human space. The orange sky bathed the land in a warm glow as children ran through the streets, laughing. Their laughter echoed through the peaceful morning, their innocence a stark contrast to the dark events that were about to unfold. Life on New Haven had always been quiet, almost too quiet. The colony had thrived for years, a testament to humanity's ability to carve out a life among the stars. And yet, on this seemingly ordinary day, the stillness of the colony would be shattered forever. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Guardian, the human defense ship that orbited high above the colony. He held a cup of coffee, watching the shift change as the crew moved with practiced ease. His eyes were tired, but the monotony of daily patrols had made the job feel almost routine. Beside him, Lisa Hayes manned the tactical station, her fingers dancing across the controls as she ran system checks. Danny Chen, hunched over the engineering console, mumbled about a power relay that needed replacing. Down below, Paul Grant walked his 8-year-old daughter, Emma, to school. Her bright eyes sparkled with excitement as she rambled on about a project she was working on in class. He smiled, squeezing her hand, knowing that today, like every other day, was another day of safety and simplicity. "Will you pick me up today, Dad?" Emma asked as they reached the entrance of the education center. Paul kissed her on the top of her head. "Your mom will get you. I've got to fix the irrigation on the south fields." Emma's smile faded, but she gave him a tight hug before running inside. Paul watched her for a moment, his heart warm, thankful for the simple life they had. As he turned to walk back to his transport vehicle, he felt an uneasy stillness in the air, something he couldn't quite place. He shook it off. Just another odd feeling, he thought. Meanwhile, on the Guardian, Lisa Hayes paused, her fingers flying over the console. She glanced up at Captain Morrison. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," she said, her voice tight. Jake's calm demeanor shifted as he set down his coffee. "What kind of strange?" "It's an energy signature. Big one, coming in fast from the outer system. It's not matching any known vessel type in our database." Jake's heart rate quickened. "Get me a visual." Lisa's hands moved in a blur, bringing the main screen to life. Space, usually empty, began to flicker. The usual stars shifted, and then a massive ship appeared, larger than anything Jake had ever seen. Dark, angular, and covered in strange symbols, it hung motionless in space, like a shadow creeping into a world uninvited. "It's not human," Lisa said softly, almost in disbelief. "Hail them," Jake ordered, his voice steady but urgent. But there was no answer, no response at all. "Get me full power to shields and weapons, Danny. Now." A chill spread through Jake as he watched the massive ship continue to position itself above New Haven, casting its dark shadow over the colony. Energy readings spiked on his sensors. The alien ship wasn't just entering orbit. It was preparing something. "They're powering up something," Lisa said, her voice tight with fear. Jake's mind raced. "Battle stations," he shouted, snapping his crew to attention. "Danny, get us moving. I want us between that ship and the colony. Now." The Guardian surged forward, engines roaring to life. But it was too late. The alien ship was already too close, too fast. Blue light erupted from its hull, sending lances of energy down toward the surface of New Haven. Jake's stomach dropped as he watched the beam spread across the colony in a sweeping motion. It wasn't a weapon, not exactly. It was a transporter. Below, Paul Grant, who had just started his vehicle, felt the ground tremble beneath him. He looked up, just in time to see the sky fill with that same blue light. His blood ran cold. "No," he whispered, his mind struggling to process what was happening. "Emma!" he screamed, tearing through the streets, his heart pounding. He knew, he felt, that something was wrong. The lights from the sky continued to burn bright as panic spread like wildfire. People screamed, running for cover. Back at the education center, Emma Grant sat at her desk, absorbed in her thoughts. Her teacher, Mr. Peters, was explaining Earth's ancient history when the blue light flooded the room. A strange tingling sensation washed over Emma, freezing her in place. She tried to move but couldn't. The room began to fade, becoming transparent, as though she were no longer there, as though she had become part of the air itself. "Emma!" Mr. Peters cried out, reaching for her, but his hand passed right through her. The last thing Emma saw was the worried faces of her classmates, their voices silent, their bodies fading into the same transparent haze. The blue light faded as quickly as it had appeared. The ground beneath New Haven quaked in silence. When the light finally disappeared, 500 children, including Emma, were gone. No trace remained. The Guardian crew, stunned by what they had just witnessed, fought to regain control. Jake stood frozen on the bridge, his eyes locked on the empty space where the alien ship had once been. The silence that followed felt deafening, and then, with a grim finality, Jake spoke. "We're going after them, no matter what it takes." The calm that had settled over New Haven after the abduction was shattered by the screams of desperate parents. Paul Grant, heartbroken and desperate, stood among a growing crowd at the education center, searching for his daughter. His world, once full of the simple joys of family, now felt like a nightmare, a twisted, unrecognizable place. As the streets filled with frantic searching, a familiar face appeared, Admiral Christine Park, leader of Earth's military forces. Park, a woman hardened by countless battles, stood tall, her eyes dark with determination. She had been briefed on the situation before landing. The Vin Empire had abducted the children, an act of war that humanity couldn't ignore. Standing with her was Commander Ryan Foster, a younger officer with a mind for strategy and quick thinking. Together, they were tasked with a mission: to find and retrieve the children, no matter the cost. In the colony's central hub, Earth Command held an emergency council meeting. The air was thick with tension as officers and leaders debated their next move. Park's voice cut through the room. "We can't sit idly by while they hold our children hostage. We need to strike, and we need to strike fast." Foster adjusted his glasses, looking at the tactical display. "The Vin Empire is vast, but we've tracked their movements. We know their ship came from deep within their system. They'll be expecting a military response, but we'll have the advantage of surprise." Park nodded, her face grim. "Surprise isn't enough. We need leverage." She paused, then turned to face the group. "Prepare the Star Killer. We'll make them understand that there are consequences for taking what's ours." Outside, the sun set over New Haven, casting long shadows across the empty streets. The tension in the air was palpable. Humanity's response was about to begin. In the war room, the reality of their situation began to settle in. Admiral Park stared at the holographic display, showing the vast expanse of Vin space, the route leading to their capital world, Vin Prime. The Vin Empire had been known to humanity for years, but until now, their interactions had been limited and somewhat cordial. Tensions had arisen over disputed territories, but nothing that suggested they would commit an atrocity like this. How could they do this? Paul Grant muttered to himself, sitting in a corner, his face pale, his fists clenched. His eyes were distant as he thought of Emma, imagining her scared, alone, and trapped on that alien station. Humans have always been seen as less than the Vin, Commander Foster explained, his voice steady as he scrolled through the intel. Their species has existed for over 3,000 years, and in that time, they've dominated weaker civilizations with little to no resistance. Park looked at the map of Vin territory, her mind racing. They don't see us as equals. To them, we're just another species to be studied, to be controlled. The door to the war room opened, and Dr. Karen Wells entered, her face tight with the weight of what they were about to undertake. We've intercepted their communications. They're planning to begin experiments on the children, biological studies to assess the strengths of our species. They see our children as resources. The room fell silent. The horror of what had happened, what was happening to the children, sank in like a stone. Park's voice broke the stillness, cold and resolute. We're not dealing with a diplomatic issue anymore. This is war. They took our children, and we will make them pay. Her gaze hardened as she turned to the others. Prepare the Guardian. We're going to Vin space. As the Guardian sped toward Vin space, the crew worked tirelessly to prepare for the looming conflict. The vastness of space stretched out before them, but the weight of their mission was undeniable. The kidnapping of the 500 children had shifted the equation. This was no longer just a rescue operation. It was a statement, a battle for humanity's very identity. If they failed, the consequences were unthinkable. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the helm, his gaze fixed on the stars ahead. This isn't just about the children anymore, he muttered to himself. This is about ensuring humanity isn't seen as weak. We can't let them think they can just take what's ours. At the tactical station, Lisa Hayes monitored their course. The Vin fleet is massive, Captain, but they won't expect us to have the Star Killer. Jake nodded grimly. The Star Killer, a weapon designed in the wake of humanity's most brutal border wars, was the last resort, an option they hoped to never use. It had the power to destroy a sun, not just destroy it, destabilize its core, causing it to collapse into a white dwarf and wipe out everything in its system. The device, small yet devastating, had been concealed in deep space vaults for years, a weapon of unimaginable consequence. It was humanity's insurance policy, and now it was their only leverage. Commander Foster, where are we on deploying the device? Jake asked, his voice cold but determined. Foster, his expression taut with focus, responded, We're ready. It's hidden aboard the Shadow Runner in the cargo hold. The plan is simple. Position it near Vin Prime's sun. Give them a taste of what we're capable of. Park entered the bridge, her eyes steely. We will make them understand that humanity has no limits when it comes to protecting its own, no matter the cost. As the Guardian entered Vin space, the time for diplomacy was over. Humanity had shown its mercy. Now, it would show its wrath. The Shadow Runner drifted silently through the dark expanse of Vin space, cloaked and nearly invisible to the enemy's sensors. The stealth ship, barely larger than a shuttle, was humanity's most advanced asset. Its cloaking technology bent light around it, rendering it almost undetectable. Inside, Captain Jake Morrison and his crew sat in tense silence, each aware of the gravity of their mission. The faint hum of the ship's engines was the only sound as Morrison's fingers hovered over the controls. Beside him, Commander Ryan Foster monitored the systems, his sharp eyes flicking between the various readouts. "We're almost at the edge of Vin Prime's system," Foster said, his voice steady but laced with tension. "We'll need to avoid the patrol routes for another few hours. If they detect us before we get close enough, everything falls apart." Morrison's gaze remained fixed on the forward screen, watching as distant stars blinked by. The weight of the Starkiller, housed securely in the ship's cargo bay, felt almost tangible. A tool of mass destruction, ready to be deployed at the flick of a switch. "How close can we get to their sun?" Morrison asked. 2 million kilometers, Foster replied. "Any closer, and the radiation from the sun will begin to interfere with our systems." "It's a fine line," Captain Morrison nodded. "We need to make it count. Once we deploy the device, we're exposed. If they detect us, we don't have much time before they send everything after us." The crew moved with quiet precision, their minds focused on the task ahead. As they approached Vin Prime's sun, a vast yellow ball of flame glowing in the distance, the stakes became clearer than ever. Back on the Guardian, Admiral Park stood on the bridge, staring at the vastness of Vin's space. This was their last chance. Their bluff had been called, and now, the final act of humanity's resolve was about to unfold. Admiral Park stood in the center of the Defiance command bridge, her hands clasped behind her back, as she observed the unfolding situation in Vin space. The warships under her command had formed a tight perimeter around New Haven, ready to launch at a moment's notice. But it wasn't the fleet that was on her mind. It was the subtle, strategic game being played with the Vin Empire. The next move was hers to make, and the weight of that responsibility bore down on her. The tension in the bridge was palpable as Helen Price, the diplomatic liaison, approached Park with a data tablet. "The Vin High Council has agreed to meet with you, Admiral," Helen said. "They'll open a communication channel in 2 hours." "Did they sound worried?" Park asked, her voice level. "They sounded amused," Helen replied, with a hint of disgust. "They believe we're bluffing." That will back down. Park's lips tightened into a thin line. "Let them think that. It'll make the message more effective when it comes." The minutes dragged on, every passing second amplifying the anxiety that gripped Park's gut. She couldn't shake the memory of the faces of the 500 children, Emma among them, still lost to the Vin. The notion that the Vin were treating this as some kind of negotiation rather than the declaration of war, it truly was made her sick. As the communication channel finally opened, a massive holographic display materialized before her, revealing the cold, imperious face of Kren, the Vin High Chancellor. His 4 eyes regarded Park with disdain, his skin an unnatural shade of blue-gray, his armor gleaming with ceremonial insignia. "Admiral Park of Earth," Kren's voice was smooth but condescending. "We received your request for dialogue. Have you come to accept our terms?" Park's gaze hardened. "No, Chancellor," she said, her voice unwavering. "I've come to give you terms." The room went silent. The game had begun. The Vin High Council chamber was massive, an imposing hall of crystal columns and soaring arches. Kren's voice echoed in the space as he spoke, his words dripping with arrogance. "You misunderstand your position, human. You have nothing to bargain with. We hold your children." He gestured toward the wide screen, where images of Earth's children, including Emma, flickered terrified faces behind transparent barriers, their humanity stark against the cold clinical setting of the Vin station. Admiral Park stood motionless, her resolve unshaken by the display. "You think your power can intimidate us," she said calmly, her voice cold as ice. "You've taken what is ours, and you'll pay for it. You've underestimated humanity's resolve." Kren's 4 eyes narrowed, and his thin lips curled into a smug smile. "Return our colonies from the disputed territories, and we will return your young ones, unharmed, within a year. Refuse, and you will never see them again." The screen shifted, showing footage of the 500 children, their faces desperate but silent. Park felt the weight of their suffering like 1,000 knives in her chest. But there was no time for sorrow now. "You think we will simply walk away from our children?" Park's voice grew sharper, louder. "We will not trade them for land or power. We will fight to the last. And if you refuse to return them, you will face the consequences. And trust me, Chancellor, you will never forget them." Kren's eyes flared with contempt, but the smugness was gone, replaced by a subtle flicker of doubt. He tried to hide it, but Park saw it clearly. He was beginning to realize they were not bluffing. "You are playing with forces you do not understand," Park continued. "And I promise you this, humanity will not bend. Your people will learn that when we protect our own, there are no limits." The silence that followed was heavy with the realization that the fate of the Vin Empire rested in the hands of a single human woman, and her threat was no empty boast. The tension in the Vin High Council chamber thickened as Spark's words hung in the air. Kren, though formidable in his power and prestige, now appeared uneasy, his confidence shaken. His 4 eyes darted back and forth between his fellow council members, some of whom were beginning to look less certain of their leader's position. The smugness had faded, replaced by a calculating coldness. Kren's voice broke the silence. "You believe we will yield to threats, Admiral. You overestimate your position. The children will remain with us, and your colonies will withdraw, as demanded, or else." He trailed off, but the implication was clear. The Vin had the upper hand. Until now. Park straightened, her face a mask of resolve. "You've made a grave mistake," she said, her voice steady, but carrying the weight of unspoken promise. "You've stolen our children, and now you will face what happens when you cross that line." Kren's expression flickered. For the first time, his arrogance cracked, revealing a hint of vulnerability. He motioned to his aides, who began scrambling at the controls. They were preparing something, sending data, perhaps, to their fleet. "Your threats are hollow," Kren said, though his words lacked conviction. "We will not bow to your demands. If you wish to fight, you will meet your end. You are a mere speck in the galaxy compared to the Vin Empire." Park's eyes narrowed. "You're wrong. The galaxy is full of specks, but humanity doesn't bow down to tyrants." The communication abruptly cut off, leaving Park standing alone in the command center, staring at the empty space where Kren's face had been moments before. The silence that followed was thick with the promise of war, the knowledge that this was just the beginning. The Defiant and her fleet were now poised for the next move. Humanity's battle for its children was about to enter a new, far more dangerous phase. As the communication channel shut off, Admiral Park stood silently in the center of the Defiant's command bridge, the weight of her decision pressing heavily on her shoulders. Kren's arrogance had finally cracked, but it hadn't been enough to break his resolve. The Vin Empire was a force to be reckoned with, But Park was prepared to show them the power of a human will. The bridge was quiet, except for the hum of the ship's engines. The crew worked efficiently, their hands flying over consoles as they prepped for the next phase. But Park's mind raced, torn between the path of diplomacy and the terrifying knowledge that the Starkiller, the weapon capable of destroying an entire star, was already in play. She glanced at the tactical display showing Vin Prime's sun. The countdown on the Starkiller's activation was ticking steadily towards 0. The device was positioned, ready to trigger the annihilation of everything within Vin's space. "Admiral," Foster's voice cut through her thoughts. He stood at his station, eyes locked on the readouts. "The Vin fleet is repositioning. They're preparing to intercept the transports, moving the children." Park's jaw tightened. The Vin were making a last-ditch effort to scatter the hostages before the deadline passed. The stakes had never been higher. "Where are the transports headed?" Park asked, her voice icy. "Towards the outer rim, Admiral," Foster replied. "They're trying to escape, but we can't let them slip away." Park's hands clenched into fists. "We'll stop them. All ships, battle formation. We intercept those transports, and we don't let them jump." The Defiant's engines roared to life as the fleet broke orbit around New Haven. They were moving fast, heading straight to the heart of the Vin's last attempt at resistance. The clock was ticking, and the choice had been made. Humanity's wrath was no longer a threat. It was a reality. Now, it was time to show the Vin that when humanity fought for its own, nothing was off limits. The battle raged across Vin space. Ships of all sizes and types engaged in a desperate struggle. The Defiant and its fleet moved with brutal precision, cutting through the Vin defenses as they made their way toward the transports. Admiral Park stood firm, her eyes focused on the chaos unfolding before her. The Vin, desperate to save face and avoid the destruction of their sun, fought fiercely, but they were no match for the relentless determination of humanity. "Admiral, we're approaching the transports." Foster's voice crackled over the comms. "They're not turning back." "We've got them." Park nodded, her jaw set. "Prepare to lock onto the transports." "We can't let them jump." The Vin, realizing the impending failure of their plan, began to panic. Their fleet scrambled to intercept the Defiant's forces, but the human warships were already on the move, launching a volley of precision strikes. Park's heart raced as she watched the transports fall into her fleet's grasp. "Give them no chance to escape," she ordered. With flawless coordination, the fleet closed in, cutting off the escape routes. The Vin transports, overloaded with children, were now trapped. Park's decision, backed by the threat of utter destruction, had forced the Vin to relent. The communication channels buzzed to life. Kren's image appeared on the screen, no longer arrogant, but resigned. His once impregnable confidence had shattered, his voice tinged with fear. "You win, human. We will return the children. But remember this. You have forced our hand. This will not be forgotten." Park stood tall, her voice steady. "The children will be returned, and humanity will never forget what you've done. But understand this. There is no line we won't cross to protect our own." The Vin fleet, now retreating, began to pull back as Park's crew confirmed that all hostages were being returned. As the transports began their descent to New Haven, the colony's horizon was filled with a new dawn. The battle was over, but the war, for humanity's place in the galaxy, had only just begun. The consequences of today would echo for generations to come. For now, The children were home, and that was a victory humanity could never afford to forget. If this story moved you, if you felt the weight of every decision, every sacrifice made to protect those we love, then I ask you to join us, subscribe, and become part of a community that understands the power of resilience, the importance of standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. Every like, every comment, and every subscription helps us share stories that touch hearts and ignite change. Together, we'll keep telling these powerful stories, and who knows, your voice might be the one that inspires the next chapter. Don't just watch, become a part of something bigger. Subscribe now.